My name is Þorgerður Ólafsdóttir. I'm a visual artist from Iceland and I'm based in Reykjavík or Kópavogur to be exact. And I think if I would have to describe my practice in few words, I would try to maybe connect it to field trips and research in a very open, sort of flexible way. And it's also, I think my practice is also very process-based. So it's driven by some curious notion of maybe elements related to the Anthropocene, which is of course something that is circulating everywhere. But for the past years I've been looking at different kind of manifestations of the Anthropocene that you come across in nature. It's an island on the south coast of Iceland and it's part of the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago. And it's the southest point of Iceland. For now 60 years, the island started rising from the sea in an eruption 14th of November 1963, and the eruption lasted for 4 years, more or less. So it was slowly building up for this time. And since the lava started flowing and scientists knew that this was becoming a permanent new place that belonged to Iceland because it was on the ocean jurisdiction. If we connect that to my project about Surtsey, that's a very interesting place because it's completely isolated. It's difficult to travel there, but then you have to have a travel pass from the Environment Institute and also the Natural Institute of Iceland, and you have to have a really good reason to go there. The lava field is quite sensitive, of course, and then I learned while I was there that beneath the lava are all these caves, and the earth is collapsing in some places, so it's not a safe ground to maneuver around. And you're also aware of that because your presence on the island is facilitating some kind of a destruction, even though it's on a small scale. But it's interesting that every year the island has this opportunity to renew itself because during massive storms that are coming, traveling up north, Surtsey is the first place that the wind hits, and that's why, and also because it's a young material, it's eroding away pretty fast. So it's quite remarkable to see how fast it's not shrinking. I remember the first time I realized that you can see it from the south coast. I thought that was really precious because you always have this far away notion of this place that it's out of reach and you can't see it, but you can actually see it in several places on the south coast of Iceland. But I guess maybe 13 years ago, a younger version of myself decided that I was gonna go there, and I had no idea how, but that became like a wish that became sort of a bit of a task that I set before myself, and I just ended up applying, and I sent a formal request asking to go there, mainly to walk around the island and experience it firsthand, because in all of the documents and the archival material, the photographs, the books that had been published about this place, no one had mentioned anything about your sort of the individual experience. And also I was really interested in seeing the human impact on the island, because I had heard that there was a lighthouse there, and I knew that there was a cabin for the scientists, and there was a weather station, there was a helicopter platform, and then I heard that there were old fossilized imprints, boot tracks in the hill slopes of Surtsey that I thought was, that was really interesting. We were on the island, more footprints were discovered. The tephra eroded away the previous winter. There was this really harsh winter with massive storms, and all of a sudden you could see these tracks, these human boot tracks in the slopes of Surtsey, and it really helped that I was part of the geology expedition, and there was a paleontologist called Raúl Esperanza who came to Surtsey specifically to look at these boot tracks, so he could read the landscape in a very different way than the rest of us, and he found more and more and more. And he told me that this was really interesting because previously this year in 2021 there were 2 new dinosaur species found in China, and the imprints on Surtsey really helped with sort of imagining the environment around those fossils in China that are millions and millions years old. And these were 55-year-old boot tracks. But what's kind of interesting is that these tracks on Surtsey are the youngest fossilized human imprints in the world, because the boot tracks on the moon are older. I applied to go to Surtsey based on looking at human impact on the island mostly, and I didn't take into consideration, I didn't even think about asking for a permission to take any natural samples, because that was not my field. But when we were cleaning up and packing up, and we were the last group to be on the island for that year, so we cleaned everything quite well, and I was sweeping the floor, and I noticed when I was looking in the shovel, I saw all of these beautiful stones and sands and minerals covered in dust, breadcrumbs. There was a dead fly, nylon thread, wood sticks, toothpick, just like everything. And that was a documentation of our stay on the island that had sort of gathered into the cabin. And then the ranger of Surtsey, he was experiencing the same thing. So he looked at his shovel and said, "Are we just supposed to throw this away?" And I saw my chance there, and I asked if it was possible for me to keep this. So every summer since 2021, I've received the floor sweep from the cabin from the geology excursion. They're part of a photography series called Like a Landscape. So I've gathered them into these mountain or island like heaps, and I've taken few photographs of them, and I'm going to show them now for the first time at the National Museum of Iceland. The book came about after I went back home and was trying to process what had happened, and I had an exhibition coming up, so the first thing was to make the works for the exhibition, and then I felt like I hadn't really told the whole story, and I didn't want only my sort of input in this story. So the idea behind the book came about soon afterwards. It started in 2023. So Guðbjörg Rannveig Jóhannesdóttir, she is an environmental philosopher, and we had a conversation about if she could write a text that spoke directly about this idea: how can you connect to a place that can't be visited and only looked at from afar? So she helped me kind of formulate these thoughts better, because I had always had some sort of a relationship and a connection to this place way before I ever went there, and I was curious why. But we make this. Everyone has a connection to the moon, for example. Everyone has their own personal connection to a place that they haven't visited. If you think about it, she wrote her text is sort of about that, how we can form and why do we form a relationship to faraway places. Þóra Pétursdóttir, she's an archaeologist, and her text is called The Surtseyan Cyborg, all these different layers of Surtsey and how difficult it is to navigate the island as a pure natural phenomena deprived of any human impact. And her text is basically about that it's impossible, even though all efforts have been sort of implemented in trying to keep this a place that is safe from humans. It's impossible. So Island Fiction is the English title of the book, and it was difficult to find an Icelandic title that carried the same notion as this. But I think fiction is very closely linked to imagination. So in order to imagine this place, you had to write up your own fiction of it. And also there's some sort of weird correlation to the moon. When you're there, you keep thinking about the moon, maybe because of the land walk, maybe because of the isolation and the environment, and then the boot tracks, but it has a really strong correlation to your idea of the moon. So, and I think fiction and imagination, it really helps you in terms of project like this, where you don't really know what the outcome is that you're led by process, intuition, and this sort of desire to combine different elements. Also, there are only females that are taking part in this publication, and it's I guess that wasn't a goal in the beginning at all, but it developed in that way. And when I realized that that was happening, I thought it was quite strong, because Surtsey's story has mostly been told by male scientists. So like other approaches now may be given some, space in this publication. Becky Forsyth, she wrote this really beautiful text where she talked about the different approach through ecofeminism, because then you're mostly like experiencing and you're looking and you're maybe interpreting instead of sort of claiming and taking ownership of land. And then this new land started forming just south of Iceland, and there was this competition that started, and there were 3 French men who were the first one to step on the island, and that was global news, not like national news, but the world went, what? Because we are part of nature, nature is part of us, and we've set our mark on Surtsey like any other place in the world. And when you get over this devastating fact, you try to sort of embrace it in a different way. And I guess that is what Surtsey taught me.